Hello ladies and gents, and welcome back to another edition of Blue Baggers Edge, and this time we are discussing the recent news, no doubt, that you've heard about. And if you haven't, it was regarding news reported by Mitch Cleary that the club has reportedly told a number of players to pursue potential opportunities elsewhere, namely Matt Kennedy, Matt Owies, and Lewis Young. Now, I want to discuss this on a number of different levels here. Now, touching on Kennedy first and foremost, the rumour here is that in his exit meeting, he did ask if there was potential for him in 2025 to play predominantly as an inside mid after being used as a virtual Swiss Army knife in multiple positions throughout 2024. Now, Voss supposedly couldn't guarantee him that going into next season, with a preference to play him as a high half forward and more so as a utility, and that if he wanted a consistent role as an inside mid, he may need to pursue opportunities elsewhere. As for Owies, despite finishing the season as the third highest goal scorer for 2024 behind Harry and Charlie, he has been told in no uncertain terms he is expendable, which is really perplexing when you consider his output and the fact that we don't really have a viable replacement, but we will discuss that in a bit more detail to come. And Lewis Young, well, it's probably no surprise here given he has slipped down the depth chart in terms of key position defenders and was only really given an opportunity in games this season out of necessity due to injury plaguing us. Now, you could excuse Young considering his circumstances, but I don't know about you, but my initial reaction on the news of Keno and Owies in particular was, I guess, of confusion, anger, and just all-round disappointment at the club. So let's start with Keno. And here's a bloke who has busted his ass all season and one whose commitment and heart you really couldn't question as one of the more consistent performers across the season, in a season where commitment, heart, and consistency came into question for a bulk of our list. And now we're so quick to move him on. And for me, it's like, well, if we can't guarantee him ample time in the position that he wants to play, it would be fair on his part if he himself came forward and told the club that he wanted to look elsewhere. But in this case, it is reportedly the club that has initiated the suggestion to move him on and stop short of saying, really, that he is an outright required player. His manager has come out, I think it was today, as I record this, and all but confirmed this and this sort of version of events, and reiterated that Keno had not requested a trade and loves the club and would happily stay there, to quote his manager. So really, the club's stance on this really does irk me. Firstly, on a cultural level, what sort of message does it send when the club doesn't see the value of him and what he has offered the side? For the club to turn around and say that he is an expendable asset throws his hard work back in his face. And it's almost a double down on the way that he was harshly subbed in the elimination final. I know you can't really get hung up on that too much, but, there were other candidates that game that needed to be subbed out, in my opinion. Small forwards, won't name names, but there were others. And, having said all that, I know that some may say that it's, hard to fit him into the lineup structurally as another inside mid, alongside the likes of Cripper and Hewitt especially, but for me, with this discussion point, it comes down more so around the depth. And depth is a massive, massive talking point here. So this is my second point behind the cultural side of things. And this links in with Owies as well. So, I don't think the club has really learnt about the value of depth and, what we really were taught a lesson for in 2024. We felt how thin we were in depth across multiple positions after injuries hit and we were exposed. And that led us to having to turn to the likes of Carroll, Binns and Lord in the middle, Young, Sam Durden and Marchbank in defence, and up forward, Motlop, Corey Durden. And you could argue, the last 5 names that I mentioned were the most fortunate of the lot to be given games. But again, it was out of necessity due to injuries. And the summary here, well, I guess you can just say that we aren't blessed with enough quality depth to be able to say that players such as Kennedy and Owies are expendable. If we were in an entirely different position where, we're well stocked, we had young players coming through that had actually shown signs of consistency and whatnot, you could probably back in the club and say, yes, it makes sense. But 2024 virtually is a snapshot of what we have to work with. If injuries hit again, and touch on wood that they don't, we could be in a world of hurt again. So for the club to be of this mindset that, Keno's expendable, Owies is expendable, and to a lesser extent, Lewis Young as well, expendable. When we don't have the depth there behind them, behind especially, I should say, Owies and Kennedy. Obviously, Young is a part of that depth that we're relying upon. But really, it is so perplexing to me. That's all I can say, really. Let's look into this a little bit further. So firstly, let's touch on the depth in the area where Keno does his best work, obviously, as a contested midfielder. So what if we, as I said, God forbid, cop similar injuries in 2025? In terms of our pure inside mid brigade, we have the following. So I spoke about, obviously, Cripper, Hewitt as first choice inside mids. Then we've got Chera, Walsh and Akers, who arguably all do their best work on the outside, on the wing, so on and so forth. But who else is there depth-wise in terms of, I guess, contested midfielders? So Elijah Hollins, he's more of a high half forward. Binns is more of an outside uncontested mid. Jack Carroll is probably one who can play the hybrid role, but could be seeking a trade back to WA, which again thins out our depth in the engine room even more, especially in the area of contested mids. So really that just leaves us with the one and only Lord himself, the Lord and hopefully Saviour in Cooper Lord. And Cooper Lord, whilst he is my new favourite, he does tick a box, but he's, you got to remind ourselves that he is coming off his first season at senior level, having only tasted 4 games. And it's a big ask for him to take a large step up in his game the season after. But, I would definitely embrace it, as I think he can be a regular in our 2025 team. But that really isn't the question here. And, it's to do with depth and the lack thereof, really, more than anything. So after him, who do we have? So the forgotten man in all of this is Lockie Fogarty, perhaps. But, again, he's probably the sort of player that has carved more of a niche role out of, playing as a half-forward flanker, that pressure forward and play higher up the ground at stages as opposed to being, a pure inside mid. By all means, he could be rotated through there, but I think where we've seen us get the most value out of him, it is in that pressure forward role. So speaking of forwards, as, traditional small crummers, after Owies, we have Motlop and Corey Durden. And of course, we have the revitalised Zach Williams, but with his injury history, you can almost pencil in that he will miss games at some point in time, really. You might count Fantasia, funnily enough, but the coaching staff are stupidly, insistent on trying to play him as some sort of high half forward / winger, despite the fact that he struggles to run out games, which, again, I've spoken enough about this and really does annoy me. And then we have, Motlop and Durden, who have both struggled to show even really a snippet of consistency, which is what Owies has displayed this season. Even if you dial it back to, recent seasons, his consistency has dialed up, and, he's got that string to his bow now where he's able to kick, almost 2 goals a week. He can pencil it in. So from that perspective, when you factor in Owies' form line, the lack of depth, again, just has me scratching my head. As for our defence, this is probably a discussion point with Young. It's a little bit different because he's not a best 22 player. But when we're speaking of depth, after Wiedering and Gov, with, of course, Marchbank confirmed that he won't be at the club in 2025, we are left with Lewis Young and Sam Durden. Yeah, there is Kemp, of course, but in my opinion, I think Brody Kemp is best suited as a third tall forward option alongside Harry and Charlie, where he can do more damage, I think, in his own right and take attention away from our 2, power tall forwards in Harry and Charlie. And, we saw at stages this season, even seasons prior, where both of those guys have been double teamed at some stage or another. And just the way that they're utilised, as Harry is sort of that high half forward, he kind of means that there's space for Charlie to lead into, but because Harry's not there, obviously all the focus goes onto Charlie, and we saw what happened when Charlie was injured late in the season, even with the elimination final against Brisbane. It meant that, Kemp was made to play that focal point, second tall forward, which I don't think he's the sort of player that can play that, and, it showed really, and Charlie was double teamed. So, if that's the case, I guess in defence, even if we account for the arrival of Nick Haynes, it still has us in a, flaky spot, virtually the same as what we found ourselves in this season if injuries were to hit and we bid farewell to Young. Also, that really does put even more, I guess. It digs more of a hole for us, I guess, in terms of our depth and lack thereof. And with Haynes as well, like he's 33 years of age in 2025, and he's, speaks for itself. He's not a long-term fix. And he's not exactly the most durable with bouts of osteitis pubis. He's had a back fracture, ankle issues, and recurrent hamstring issues as well across the journey. So even if Young is depth and, the most expendable of the three that we're discussing, point here is that he's still depth and valuable depth, I think, that we can't afford to lose in a position where we aren't exactly well stocked and overflowing with options. My question out of this, I guess, is what of Sauce? He's kind of the forgotten man amongst all of this. Coming off his season-ending injury, can he come back and carve a spot out? Does he potentially, take that third tall spot up forward? Does it mean then that Kemp goes back into defence? Maybe. Or can Sauce play in defence as sort of that third tall defender that can sort of run off and play a bit more attacking, not just defensively as well. So further to that point, the value of Keno, I guess, when we're discussing him, he's elevated beyond being just, another slow contested midfielder, given that he does have the ability, as we saw this year, to be the Mr. Fix-It in a number of roles. And it's this real versatility that holds him above and beyond just simple depth in one position. And at various stages, he was asked, of course, to play up forward. He drifted down back into defence at various stages, and even contested in the ruck, funnily enough. And these type of players, these utilities, don't really grow on trees. And without him, we would have struggled to fill the holes that he did himself in 2024. And it could have been struggle street even more than what it was at various stages. So that's it, really. Like, for me, that's virtually my opinion on all three of those players. They all hold a place on the list, in my opinion. And the drop in depth falls away rapidly in each of the positions that Kennedy, Owies, and Young would otherwise fill. So the point here is we need to learn from, I guess the only silver lining that these injuries gave us in 2024, and it was in the form of the awakening to the club, to the fact that we lack depth, and most importantly, quality depth at that. So we aren't exactly in the position to be trading away first choice quality players in Kennedy and Owies. And, spoken from a perspective of, the lack of depth that we have, that does extend to Young, even if he doesn't exactly tick the quality box. Because of the fact that we don't have that much depth, his, I guess his value is pushed a little bit higher up. So in summary, I think, anything that we get in return for them draft capital wise will not really be worth near as much as what they offer the side. And yes, even Young as depth, who, mind you, actually played some half decent games to end the season as a fill-in as his confidence was growing. So anyway, those are my thoughts. You may agree, you may disagree. And either way, I'd love to hear them. So let us know your opinions and thoughts in the comment section down below. Really, questions I have for you. Have we learnt or have we not learnt from 2024 being exposed for the lack of depth that we have? Can we afford to give up our most promising small forward option in Owies? I know I spoke of it before as well, that we do have Williams, but can we rely on Williams? He's struggled to play an entire season for quite a while, I think, ever since we traded for him. And, what of the treatment of Kennedy? Do you think he's worth more to the side than merely another slow contested midfielder, given that we unlocked him as more of the Swiss Army knife utility type player? So let us know. And until then, ladies and gents, thank you as always for tuning in. If you are new to the channel, I would love for any of you to show your support in subscribing to the channel. Really do appreciate your support, and it just helps the channel grow. It helps YouTube push this video and all my other videos out to the masses, all the baggers out there. So with that, ladies and gents, thank you as always, and we'll catch you in the next one. Go Baggers.